Hello. Today I'm going to be reading for you a story from Cricket Magazine, which is a magazine series that has a lot of short stories in it, and I would highly recommend it during quarantine. So, today we're going to be reading a story from there. Today I'm going to be reading the story called The Girl in the Windmill by Wendy Nicol. Marchie Van Dyke lived in a windmill. At the age of 10, her Vader and Moiter perished at sea, and she was sent to live with her Opa on the coast. Despite her grief, she grew to love him, and he taught her all about how to grind the village's grains and tend the enormous sails and gears that made the windmill run. Her Opa hadn't always run the mill, though. Each evening, by firelight, he would show Marty the amazing feats of transformation that he used to perform all over the world. "Oh, please do the mouse again," Marty would plead, and Opa would smile broadly at his one-person audience and twitch his nose. His thick white mustache would grow thinner and wispier, and his ears would grow larger and fold inward. His old brown jacket would grow fuzzy, like fur, and he'd shrink himself down to barely 3 inches tall. Only his eyes, his bright blue sparkling eyes, gave away his true identity. Then he'd scamper around Marchie's feet, and she'd shriek and cover her eyes. When she opened them again, there he was, her Opa, just the same as he'd always been. Other nights, he'd amuse her with stories about her parents. She never thought to ask them of their past while they were living, but now those tales were more dear to her than any made-up fairy tale. "Tell me again how they met," she'd ask, cupping her chin in her hands. "Your Moiter loved to dance," Opa would say, his eyes wistful and wet. "Wherever I performed, she'd always come with me and dance for the kings and queens and princesses." She wore a white dress and would move like a swan across the stage, drawing the eye of everyone in the room. And that's how she met my Vader. Ja, it is. He was but a young artist with nothing to offer her, so instead he promised to make a sculpture of her as a wedding present, though he doubted he'd be able to capture even a fraction of her real beauty. He revealed the finished sculpture on their wedding day, and it was a perfect likeness of his bride. It was heralded near and far as the most beautiful piece of art he'd ever seen. Wealthy lords and ladies flocked for miles around to ask your Vader to make sculptures for them. Marchie clasped her hands together, nearly bursting with pride. Yet somehow this picture of her Vader as a highly sought-after artist wasn't quite the childhood she remembered. Hers, instead, was a childhood of watery soaps and small, dirt-floored cottages. "What happened, Opa?" "Ah, well," Opa would say, shaking his head at the turn of events. "It was a curse, that beautiful statue of your Moiter, because no matter how beautifully he sculpted anything else, the patrons were always disappointed, because no other work came near the loveliness and perfection of that sculpture. Soon his business dried up, and as a final resort, he agreed to sell the sculpture of your Moiter to a far-off king. They traveled to the distant land to present the sculpture to him, and then set to sea again, their pockets filled with enough gold to live comfortably the rest of their years. And all would have been well had it not been for the storm," Opa hissed and shook his head. And they sat quietly for a moment, deep in their own thoughts, until Opa looked up at Marchie slyly and asked, "How would you like a rabbit with a white fluffy tail?" and his Opa twitched his nose and his ears stretched up over his head, all of Marchie's sorrow melted away like butter on warm bread. The years passed, and Marchie grew into a beautiful young woman. Then one day, Opa set out to deliver a barrow full of flour to the baker down the way, leaving Marchie alone to tend the mill. She just finished sweeping the floors, and washing the windows when she heard a knock on the door. Thinking it was one of the local farmers coming to have his grain milled, she opened the door with a smile. The man who stood before her, though, was not one of the farmers, nor any of the other people from the town. He wore the clothing of a sailor, and the weight of his money belt seemed too great for a seaman. She leaned out the door and could see, off the distant waves, the massive ship from which he'd come. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, "but my Opa only does business with the local farmers. We don't have anything to trade." "No matter, señorita," he said with a smile. Marchie backed up across the threshold, for she saw something in his eye that she didn't quite trust. "My ship, you see, was caught in a storm, and we only wish to know where it is that we are now, so that we may be on our way once more." Marchie gave him the name of the nearest town and pointed him towards the river nearby, and he was so pleased with her answer that he promised her a beautiful golden mirror for her troubles. "It's only just on board my ship, right over there, within sight of your windmill. Please just set abroad with me, and you'll be given a reward for your kindness." Marchie hesitated, but then she thought of her Opa and how much he might earn by selling off a golden mirror. It would certainly be enough to keep them warm and fed all winter. So she agreed to go to the ship. As long as she stepped foot on board, however, the sly sailor pulled the gangplank forward and threw her to the deck. "You tricked me," she shouted, fighting her way to the side of the ship so that she might fling herself back into the water. "Let me go! Let me go back to my Opa." "Enough, señorita," he said with a scowl, and Marchie stopped fighting, seeing his hand close around the terrible knife at his side. My name is Biagio. I'm the second son of a king, and therefore have no claim to an inheritance. But my older brother, Admano, refuses to marry, and my father has promised a third of the kingdom to whoever can find him a bride." "But why should I marry him?" Marchie asked, looking out at the shore, where Opa's cozy little windmill grew further and further away by the minute. "And why would he want me?" "He is in love with a statue," Biagio explained with a sneer, "a statue he found hidden in a locked room at the palace. He will not marry until he finds a woman whose beauty matches." Marchie drew in her breath, for she suddenly suspected what this statue was. "Does this statue look like me?" she asked. "It does," Biagio said, "as it should, for I know its story. I have searched high and low for the lost daughter of the sculptor, and hope that she may bear at least a passing resemblance to her mother. Imagine my joy she may bear at least a passing Imagine my joy when you opened the door of that windmill, and I saw that, indeed, you do. You shall make my brother happy, and that shall make me rich." With that, Marchie wept, for she knew that there was no way that this prince would willingly let her go, knowing that he'd never find anyone to suit his brother's taste as she did. She leaned over the deck railing, and her tears fell to the water below. Then suddenly, a fish jumped from the water, a fish with bright blue eyes, sparkling eyes. "Opa!" she shouted, and the next time it jumped, she caught it in her apron and hastily whispered her plight before dropping it back into the water so it could breathe. Although the rest of the day the fish followed the ship, and Marchie felt comforted by its presence, knowing her Opa was there and would not desert her. That night, when night fell, the prince dragged her into to his table, demanding that she dine with him. She wept into her soup as Biagio slurped his. Just then, something tapped at the window, and the prince stood and opened it, peering out into the dark sea. A raven flew forth and landed upon the table. "Get out, foul bird," Biagio shouted, waving his arms. Marchi, recognizing the bird's bright blue sparkling eyes, shielded it from him. "It's harmless. Let it be." Then the raven spoke in a voice hoarse and ragged. "No prize will be given to you, treacherous villain, for the gift that you give is not yours to be given. Tell your brother of this beautiful one, and your very own body will turn into stone." Biagio shook and shuddered and stumbled from the room. As he left, Marchi gently patted the raven's head. Then it flew back out the window, and Marchi returned to her chamber, certain that in the morning she'd find herself once again on the shores beside her windmill, returned to her rightful place. But when morning broke, the ship had not turned around, nor did it the following day, or the next. Marchi spied the blue-eyed fish in the ship's wake, and knowing her Oppa was there, did not despair. But Biagio became more and more agitated and rarely slept, instead pacing the deck well into the night. When they finally arrived at the far-off kingdom, he brought Marchi directly to the castle and shut her up in her room by herself, save for one small blue-eyed mouse, which followed them in from the harbor. "You shall meet Adamo in the morning," he said. You shall present yourself, and you shall tell him that I have sent you to him. I shall not be the one to tell him, and therefore I will not be in danger of that horrid raven's curse. Do not betray me, or I promise you shall regret it." The following morning, she was bathed and dressed, and led to the great hall where Prince Adamo was dining. When he saw her across the room, he rose from his chair and rushed to her, falling at her feet and kissing her head. Signorina," he said, "there is no beauty like yours. Please tell me who brought you to me, and I may reward him. For merely being in your presence, I have now known happiness." Marchi was shocked, for this man was as gentle and sincere as his brother, was harsh and cruel. She looked up and saw Biagio standing in the doorway, ready to claim his prize. But there at his feet was a tiny blue-eyed mouse, and Marchi knew just what to do. "My Oppa came with me, your highness," she said. "He is watching over my journey to you." "Lies!" Biagio shouted. He rushed into the room and grabbed her arm. "She lies. I have brought her. She is my gift to you. She has no family here, only me." No sooner had he spoken the words than his feet turned the same gray color of the stone floor, up through his legs, and then over his chest and arms. The color spread until every last hair on the wicked prince's head was made of stone. And standing beside him was not a little blue-eyed mouse, but Marchi's very own Oppa, with bright blue sparkling eyes that looked up upon her with pride. And so it came to pass that Prince Adamo courted the beautiful daughter of the sculptor and the dancer, and when they married, her Oppa, who had overseen her journey to the far-off land, inherited a third of the kingdom. There he built a little windmill, where he lived out of his days in peace and quiet, knowing his granddaughter was safe and well loved. The end. I hope you have enjoyed this story, and I will be posting more stories and books for you all to enjoy soon. Thank you for watching. Bye.